Hi, and welcome to Let's Learn to Sew. In today's video, we're going to be moving forward with the shorts that we started in our sew along. In the last video, we got our fabric cut out and all of our pieces marked. In today's video, we're going to get the pattern taken off, our pieces pinned together, and then sewn together. When you're reading your instructions, you'll see that it says with right sides together, stitch front 4 and back 5 together at the inner leg seams. Here it is for the shorts or for the pants. So I've got piece number 4 and piece number 5. I'm going to go ahead, remove the pattern piece and set it to the side. And this is the leg seam of each one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and place them right sides together. And you want to make sure that you match up the markings that you made. Here's one of my markings. There's the other one. I'm going to line those up. Line up your two end pieces. If everything was cut correctly, those will match up. I like to pin back out of the way of my 5/8 seam allowance. So I'm going to place my pins back here. And you guys may be able to tell that there's a stitch line there. What I did was I stitched these all together and then realized that the camera was not focused in well. So I took the stitching out and am re-recording the video. Okay, so that's my marking. My marking on the other side is matched up. I'm going to do the same thing with the other front and back piece. Get everything lined up. There's my marking on each side. You don't need a whole lot of pins. We're going to line up the edge of our fabric, which is the inner seam edge, with the 5/8 marking on our sewing machine. I'm going to be using black thread so that you guys can see my stitch line, but I would suggest using a thread that blends with your fabric in your top and bottom thread. I've got my thread tails under my foot and to the back of my machine. I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with that 5/8 seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and remove your pins as you go if you don't have them out of the way. We're at the edge of the fabric, so we're going to go ahead and back stitch again. Raise the presser foot and trim your threads. You always want to make sure that you pull your thread tails to the back of the machine. And we're going to do the same thing with the other front and back pieces. Raise the presser foot, trim your threads, and we'll head back over to the cutting table. So I'm back over at my cutting table. I've got my ironing board set up. My iron's heated up. We're going to remove those pins. The pattern instructions do not call to press this, but you will get much better seams if you press as you go. So I like to press as sewn. When you see press as sewn in directions, that's exactly what it means. You just press it flat together. Then I like to go back and open up my seams and press them open. And a lot of times if you see puckering in your stitching, if you'll press, that puckering will disappear. Do the same thing with the other leg. We're going to press as sewn. Open it up. So now you should have two sections that look like this. What we're going to do is we're going to put them right sides together, matching up the crotch seam. And this is one of the times that I do go ahead and put my pins coming off the edge. And I usually just do it right here in the seam section. So your seams should match up. Then you're going to match up any notches that you made. So we can see our notches there. And you're going to place just a few pins to hold everything in place as you stitch. Make sure the edge of your fabric stays lined up. And you're going to go all the way around the U. There's my markings. Make sure my markings match up, and they do. Line up my top piece also. Okay. Sometimes when people are first beginning to sew, they're tempted to put a lot of pins in, but really the fewer pins you use, the less trouble you'll have. So now what we're going to do is your fabric should look like this. Again, it's right sides together, so you should see the wrong side of everything except in that seam area. We're going to take this over to the machine, and we're going to start at the top and go all the way around, and we're going to back stitch at the beginning. So let's look and see what that looks like on your directions. So it says with right sides together, pin the center seam, matching inner leg seam and notches, stitch, and then you're going to stitch the seam and stitch it again over the first line of stitching. That's going to reinforce that crotch area. So you can see you've got your stitch lines here. These would be the notches that you marked. You probably either marked them with a fabric marker, or I know some people cut out and make the little notches. Thread tails under the presser foot into the back of the machine. Machine is still set at a 2.5 for my stitch length. Lining the edge of the fabric up right with that 5/8 seam allowance. Take a stitch or two, back stitch. Now, we've got that seam area coming up. You want to make sure that that stays down in place. We're at the other side, so I'm going to back stitch. Now the instructions say to reinforce this stitch by going back over it. If you had a reinforced stitch, you could use that instead. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch back over it, but I'm not going to record that since all you're going to be doing is the exact same thing. Raise your presser foot and trim your threads when you're done. Back over at the cutting table, and I've got my pins removed. And before we move on to the next step, I did want to show you in the next step, even though in step 2 it does not show pressing your seams open, it does show them in the picture that they've been pressed open. I do prefer patterns that go ahead and tell you to press them, because not everybody's going to notice or know that that means to press your seams open. Something I wanted to show you guys is it does not show clipping your seams in the crotch, but if you don't, it's going to be pretty uncomfortable. So what you want to do is take some little snips or your pinking shears and just go into that curve. It's going to make them feel more comfortable. They're going to fit better. Just make sure that you don't snip into your seam. Really, all curves that when you're sewing should be clipped. We can press this open. And the area where you've clipped does not need to be pressed. The two long sides up to meet each other. You should have something that resembles a pair of shorts. So the next set of our directions move us into sewing the side seams together. We're going to do things a little bit different, a little bit out of order, and I'll pick up with that in the next video.